the Cambrian explosion analogy was excellent, and I think just helped to frame, I think for me and a bunch of people that I saw in the chat, just helped to frame this day perfectly. Really, we're just seeing this explosion in open data formats too, but in engines, perfect analogy, and it's continuing to evolve, and I'm very excited to hear what this panel, the kind of light that this panel will shine on this explosion moving forward. We're letting everybody in on Arturas. Welcome to the stage.
Hey, everyone.
We got Jing, Dipti, and Jonathan. All right, guys. Take it away. I'll be back soon.
All right, folks. Great to see everybody again. And yeah, welcome to this panel. I think this is going to be just a very casual deep dive into the world of open data. So thanks for taking time. So I'll quickly kick off a quick intro about me. Vinod Chandra, founder CEO at One House. Also, primarily wake up and think about open data, work on something around open data for a while now. And I also have a lot of amazing folks here who work in and around that area. So I'll quickly do intros here, starting from Dipti. Dipti is VP and General Manager at Microsoft, managing OneLake, and also, has a long storied career around databases, startups and whatnot. So Dipti, thanks for being here. We look forward to kind of tapping into some of your wisdom here around this area. We also have Arturas. Arturas leads data platform at KAYAK. Long-time KAYAK user here. Still use it to pretty much every one of my trips. And Arturas has seen the different, we just talked about the Cambrian explosion. He's probably seen all the prior and the different variants of these systems in the trenches, dealt with them. So Arturas, I'm hoping you'll lend a deeper practitioner lens into the conversation today. And we have Jonathan, VP and Distinguished Engineer from Query, actually brings a very different perspectives panel around like data security. Somebody who's looking at it from like hey, what's going on? What are all these data systems doing? Kind of looking at it from a bird's eye view. So, and Jin from Uber, senior staff engineer working on data infrastructure. And as you all probably know, Uber is one of these companies where, we build a lot of data infrastructure. I used to work at Uber. We originated the transactional data lake, the OG term for what we call data lake houses. So, Jing, happy to have you here and also learn as well. All right, so let's kick it off. And Dipti, I want to start from you. So we've seen this clear wave moving away from closed proprietary platforms towards open architectures. What do you think is fundamentally driving this? Is it cost, flexibility, community, something deeper? What's going on? Why now, right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Vinod, and thank you for having us here. Always fun talking about data and learnings as well, right? So there's definitely a big shift happening. Some of us who've been in this space for a while feel like we've been talking about it forever. But honestly, this is a foundational change that needs to happen through so many segments of customer bases, right? It's not just the Ubers of the world that kind of need to go through it. And there's various different reasons. While cost and flexibility are a big part of it, it comes down to, I think, three foundational things that we're seeing. One is just expanding use cases of data, right, in general. There's so much more that customers, users want to do with their data. It used to start, be analytics and reporting. Increasingly, it's all sorts of AI use cases. And so what this means is that data needs to be interoperable across systems, right? And what that means is that's the second point is interop across databases, where we used to have a lot of proprietary formats in the past and try to squeeze every bit of performance out of those formats. And in some ways, the customer was locked in. And today, it really is the interop, which is very important for customers because at the end of the day, it's their data, right? And they want to do different things with their data and possibly with different engines. So multiple engines then come into play. And if you truly want to interrupt across things, you need to have some consistency with the formats, and that's kind of the core reasons why we're seeing this change. For Microsoft, it was a very big deal to move away from proprietary formats that have been optimized for years and years to open formats. We started off with Delta. We now support Iceberg using Xtable, and we've been working with you in the community on this for some time. But it's not just one as well, right? The flexibility means multiple formats, especially the clouds, our customers. We see all the options, and so that's how we're looking at it.
Awesome. Great perspective. And we cut to Arturas. So you've been at KAYAK for over a decade. You've seen a bunch of things, right? So it's always, like I said, great to hear from those building in the trenches. How do you see the move to open data? Why do we think if it's so great? Why do we end up with closed platforms as the norm? And what do you think are the top 3 reasons for from a practitioner lens on why people move to an open platform?
Thank you, Vinod, for having me here. Really, excited. As you said, like very often we from the trenches don't have to say a lot, just digging there and doing our work. I think, like before was going and talking about the move, we need to first realize, like of the beginning of like why we need to move away to the open and like what happened before, like how did we end up in the world where we have this proprietary solutions available to us and why it's so interesting or useful for us be there, right? Like I think you are a very good example of that, which I just learned. You worked as an Uber, you found a solution to the problem, and you said like, well, solve this problem, we might solve this problem for other users. And when you are a company which specializes in some activity, you not necessarily want to solve all the problems, right? So then you would buy just solution which is giving out there off the shelf, and that's great because like your return on investment of developing a tool, you would rather like rely on the team who doing those things. Now the interesting thing happens is that if you are shaping entire your architecture around a single vendor, you basically start thinking as a vendor. And it might be that your business not necessarily matches the thinking of the vendor, and you might be in the situation where you need to figure out like what your business actually need. So you need to have this balance. As always, everywhere there is a balance between like what is useful to buy, what is useful to make yourself. I think the balance is somewhere of the merge. And if like you would ask me of sort of like when you do consider you need to move to some some open source solutions or like open platform solutions, I think you need to look into your business or organization, and you need to sort of like figure out like what is your requirements, of course, what is the cost, and then eventually you can think of the things like that, right? Like it's like for us it was more about how big we are and how much more we can scale with the given solution. And we end up understanding that, and I think this is majority of the companies have the same thing, not all the tools fits all the needs. You sometimes need to have different tools, and open standards actually allows us to achieve that goal because you're not locking yourself to a single solution. You are able to move to the like other maybe more optimized solutions for a different business needs.
Got it. I think that's your point about you start to think like a vendor around this. That hits home. I think I've seen like a lot of companies. I think it's a really good way of framing it. I want to go to Jing, like to you. So if from these two conversations, the theme that is kind of standing out here is open data platforms bring a lot of flexibility and right, that's the theme. So Uber has been like a big champion around like open data lakes and data lakehouses and stuff. Can you share more? I was there, but I think we overlapped a little bit. I don't know how things are today, right? So can you share from your perspective on what an open data platform means to you, first of all, right? What do we mean when we say open data platform? How do you define it? And also maybe share a little bit about how Uber is building and operating their massive platform, how do you use multiple engines? That's the aspect that I found very intriguing at Uber as well as at LinkedIn before that. And I would love for you to share more of that with our audience here.
Sure, thanks, Vinos, and super happy to be here. So in my view, the open data platform is a multi-layer architecture. So in the middle, we have the transaction management, and we are leveraging the different, open table format. We talk about Iceberg, Hoodie, and the data lake. Underneath, there's also physical data layer, which using open data format like Parquet. And those data are queried, read and read by different engines. Now we talk about the open, engines, query engine. At Uber, we have Spark, we have Presto, we also have actually a stream solution for using Flink. So on top of that, we actually has a lot of applications. I'll take data injection at Uber, where is one application is built on dual engines. So it ingests data from Spark, using Spark, and also inject data using Flink, and offering different level of latency SLA based on the business requirements. So beyond that, we actually also have a large number of turbo services, which are doing maintenance operations such as deleting old version of data. Also, we have those turbo service managing compliance legal operations such as encryption and account deletion. Plus, it's also for cost efficiency, like pruning old and unused columns. And then to manage actually those table service is also a big task, right? It's a large number of table service, which at Uber we're building actually system to be able to run those table service as part of the open data platform. So beyond that, I talk about the application layer. There's also a growing trend at Uber, especially in the AI space. I think that's pretty common, like right now in the whole world. And all of those applications are being built on top of the open data platform at Uber.
Got it. Awesome. So if you could share, do you guys use any closed proprietary engines at all, or is it all your main engines are all open source engines on open formats?
Yes. So open table format, we're using actually Apache Hoodie, and for the open query engines, we have Presto, Spark, and Flink, and all of those are open source, and Uber is a big contributor to that.
All right, amazing. All right, Jonathan, you, like I mentioned before, you have like a very interesting vantage point here. You work in data security. You have to deal with all these different systems in one way or the other. How do you see this whole data lakehouse movement, if you will? Is this the de facto starting point now? Do you think we've achieved that level? Does it just like start and end with open table formats, the Delta, Hoodie, Iceberg, or there is more challenges to actually making open data lakehouse the norm in the industry?
No, I mean, well, first off, thank you, Vinod, for having me on the panel, and for the conference for letting a security engineer talk on the open table format panel. But yeah, we sort of cross a lot of open formats as well as closed, right? Your BigQueries, your Redshifts, and whatnot of the world. Coming from like the security perspective, I feel like my industry usually lags behind a couple of years, right? I mean, Hoodie and Iceberg have been around for almost half a decade, a little bit more, and now you're starting to hear security practitioners talk about it a little bit more, but not too much. But I hope it'll be de facto, if not de jure, as far as what you go with. And a lot of the impetus is around cost sensitivity, access, and just interoperability, right? I mean, I think that's why my peers on like the real data side of the house use the open table formats. But even still today, folks are using SIMs like Splunks, Logarithms, New Relics, Datadogs, and whatnot. And I'm sure everybody listening and everybody here on the panel has probably seen one or two of those before to force you to put all your logs and all your telemetry into. But now, openness being kind of the mood, I suppose you would call it. It will be that way soon, right? We have a joke in the security industry, the SIM is dead, long live the SIM. And I think, the transactional data lake, open table formats are the closest we're actually going to get to killing those, right? You have folks from, on the cloud side who want to return to on-prem. So they're using things like Ceph and MinIO to build their own data lakes, S3 compatible storage on-prem, or you have folks who want to use S3, GCS, ADLS v2 over on the Azure side, right? It definitely starts with Iceberg, Hoodie, and Delta. Obviously, they all have kind of different differences, right, and other strengths and weaknesses. If I was building like an alert data lake, so to speak, where I needed to actually keep track of like the canonical GUID coming from an EDR or some other security system, I might go with Hoodie. But if I'm just writing in a ton of raw EDR data, I might go with Iceberg. And if I was just trying it out for the first time and I don't like catalogs, which you should use a catalog. I know Roy's listening somewhere, so I'm not going to say don't use a catalog. Maybe you'll go with Delta. But beyond that, obviously, you have to kind of like work backwards from your use cases. I think the hardest part of it is not necessarily writing the data, even though there isn't a ton of rate support for all the engines from all the places outside of kind of like the incumbent players, Flink, Spark, and so on. But figuring out actually how to move all that data, security company could easily have petabyte scale daily from one source system, right? Pretty soon we'll have companies that are at exabyte scale kind of operating that way. So the pressure is only going to mount. But then also it's from the security requirements, right? You have regulatory side of the house where you have, different privacy regimes that manage things like right to be forgotten, the ability to go and scrub records. Maybe you'll have EPHI or some other PI as defined by like GDPR or, HIPAA, high tech, high trust, right? That you need to remove. But then at the same token, the data that's in your lake, in your warehouse, and that lake house, right, is also, it needs to be handled appropriately. So building, minimum necessary privileges and different sort of like security controls and constraints without hitting the brakes on people, right? You want to build guardrails up. You don't want to necessarily hit the brakes, but it's an exciting time for sure in the industry. And it's not that the closed formats will really go away anytime soon. I mean, we're kind of forcing them, right? Like all of them now have Iceberg support, which is pretty funny. I think the last thing is just, more interoperability, right? Like I said, when we all introduced ourselves to each other before the panel today, we need a clear winner. I think to really help set the pace, but I'll keep my opinion to myself as what the winner should be.
All right. Fair enough. So I think just to touch on that, right? I think there's a earlier talk, BigQuery talk, where I asked the same question, which is, hey, what is the majority right now? Is it closed or open? I think obviously I have like technical opinions on the thing aside. I think it'll be good for the industry overall to flip to an open format as a default, right? So I'm also waiting for the day where warehouses. It's still not the default, right? The closed formats are the default if you use for any managed service. I think we first have to cross that bridge. I think we spend a lot of time around the unification of the table formats. And in some sense, we've done a lot of work around that. We kind of managed to actually make progress on that, as opposed to, but the real elephant in the room is the closed format versus open format. That's something that remains to be seen. And I'm really hoping that in the coming years, open becomes the default across warehouses everywhere. And then we actually start to see that. It don't truly happen until like it's the open is the default, right? Anyways, cutting to that, Dipti, like you've been a huge proponent of the disaggregated data stack. I don't know what the latest cool term for that is. I think that's what we used to call it like a couple of years ago. So now even in this conversation, we talked about open formats, closed formats. We now talked about open compute engines, closed compute engines. There's also a lot of work around like open catalog, closed catalog. If you look at it, there is the stack is getting disaggregated. You have an open, closed flavor for each, right? So in this model, how should companies be thinking about build versus buy, and what are open versus closed? What do you think are the factors that you would encourage people to closely consider to make those decisions?
Yeah, and I think this is tied to your previous comment about open, closed, and so on, right? Disaggregated stack overall, I think everyone agrees that that's a non-regrettable move, right? You have to be moving to a disaggregated stack. The question is open or closed, right? Off the shelf or truly open source. There are options. But from a scale perspective, from a especially with we could have said, like everyone is, the stack was built for AI, right? It originated before AI, right? But it turns out it's very good stack for AI as well. And so as we think about it, it's a non-regrettable move to have a disaggregated stack. You've got to have that. Then on top of that, the question becomes, open formats or closed formats. I think we're very much moving towards open formats. There's the last few people, I would argue that, if a cloud company like us can move to open formats, I think everyone can move to open formats. It was a big, big deal. It's hard, right? Open heart surgery with the query engine to be able to support it, but it's possible. And I really hope that we, move towards that. Then it comes to open source versus off the shelf, right? And that's where you have to assess what your company does, what the talent is, right? What your custom stack looks like. If you're on an open stack, you probably are, going to be open, maybe pick Apache or Linux Foundation projects and so on. But if you're a smaller company that's starting off, you may not have the talent, right? That's needed to build truly open source stack. And that's where SaaS experiences really simplify, right? API first and SaaSified products that are super easy to use and that consolidate many different pieces and still keep them disaggregated, so you get that flexibility. It's going to be really important. And so, yes, there's a lot of different, considerations. I would say talent, cost. So nothing is free. Even if you pick open source, there's no free lunch. So it will be in cost of talent. But I think it's about assessing that, figuring out what your strengths are as an organization, and then picking the right path towards it. With OneLake, what we're trying to do is go to multiple engines, right? So, we can support many different flavors for table formats as well as engines. And so you can mix and match. So the mix and match option will continue. I think it will evolve. And so it end up being a bit of a hybrid is the way I see it.
Got it. So one quick follow-up on the complexity part of it. The common criticism that let's say, I'm a huge proponent of the disaggregated stack as well, is that, it's so many vendors, right? Suddenly, like something that took us like one vendor, is now taking like 4 or 5 vendors. Sure, I have the flexibility, but like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so if you piece it together, then yes, there is complexity from piecing it together. A lot of platforms will have a disaggregated stack within their platform. And so you might go with some options that the platform provides, but use an open source engine, for example, right? You can run DuckDB on OneLake, for example. So that's where that combination might come in with open formats, open engines, open source. New models will come up, new engines will come up, and you don't want to get locked into that. And that's where the open formats and table formats is really foundational, because up the stack you could change and mix and match. But if you don't have that foundation that's open, your interop is going to be really hard.
Got it. Awesome. Arturas, coming back to you, right? Around like so many teams that I see, like they take on a data lake project to say, I'm going to save cost on my warehouse, right? And more recently, let's do an iceberg project to save cost on our warehouse, right? So how do you think an open data architecture actually save cost on your with compared to your warehouse, right? Where do these cost savings come from? And and there's complexity in building your own open source, kind of stack, right? So do the cost and complexity of building an alternative cancel the gains that you get? So what teams should and shouldn't be building open data, what in your mind?
Yeah, that's a very great question, Vinod. Before I answer that, I would just like to say that I completely agree with what Dipti has to say about, all the, the stuff. That's the reality. And having the open storage format or open like table format, that's the raw point, because this is where your data is, and just like the flexibility of going, like 100% agree. Anyway, so I think for myself, I still trying to figure out the lakehouse value. What value does it propose? I'm not saying that this is, like a bad technology or anything like that. It's just like still need to validate to myself what type of the problem it is solving. Now, to your question about, like the teams going into the lakehouse, I think my 2 cents of, don't want to brag, but still like 2 cents of, like decades of experience, I would say the following, like look into your data. right? If you have just a couple megabytes of your, like daily, like you're producing a couple megabytes per day. I mean, you don't need to go to, like these open source formats. The Postgres will do just fine. If you have gigabytes of data, then you just, like it's most likely then you don't really have a data engineer, or like you will maybe already have now a data engineer, but you still don't have a team. It's expensive. I completely agree again with what Dipti said. Like the talent is expensive, and just even starting on this project will be, painful. So if you just have like 1 gigabyte of data per day, which you produce, just go with any of the vendor providers. I mean, they will take care of you, and you will have an easy go. If you going into the situation where you say like, look, okay, I have a staging data, I want to add like a logic layer on top of it. Now we're talking that you need to have a data, a data lake. If you want to do a if you want to support the asset on top of that, then this is where the lakehouse comes into play. In my personal opinion, I think I will be always more pro the data warehouse when it comes to the performance, and sort of like ability to do so. The lakehouse solves a certain problems which many companies do have, but a certain size companies have. So my recommendation, for anyone going in there is to actually figure out if you really want to go there. If you really should go there. Now, let's say you really need to go there, right? So then the conversation is different. And I think, like open source format, and again, I will just repeat the same as Dipti says, it actually helps you a lot, because first of all, you figure out your storage. You now can choose from vast variety of the, like the compute engines to work on top. You can switch match, like even some of the data warehouses, that's become a tradition, what they expose you with the iceberg format, like via the external table interface, or, like the Parquet in the past. I mean, just industry just goes there, because everyone understands that even today, if you look at the new product which is created, it will always have the S3 support as a storage, and an iceberg or Parquet reader to basically continue reading that. So this will eventually, like cost you money, but if and only if you truly need to go there. And that's what is the important thing you need to answer to yourself.
All right, awesome. So I think we are running very tight on the clock. So very quickly, just to close it out, starting from Jing, maybe go around and talk about anything that you're personally excited about in this open data space, just stuff that you're looking forward to. Maybe, Jing, do you want to go first? We have, I think, a minute.
Yeah, sure. I think looking forward, people has already talked about interoperability between different table format, right? This has been going on. We have an X table, which transform the format and really make the work easy. You don't need the customer do not need to worry about which format you use. You just actually leverage the benefits. This is actually exactly what we want to enable, right? Just adopt all different kind of open table format and leverage the strengths from the underlying technologies. And apart from that, there's another thing which actually we're partnering with Data Straddle is to enhance the open data catalog, Gravitino, and building all the different data agents at Uber. And this open data log becomes the foundation, like core concepts and the foundation to, like an information hub, which we can have those agents talk to each other and then be smart about the information and give the business another push.
Awesome. Jonathan, do you have
yeah, multi-engine writes for sure, and next-gen tools. I love Spark. I hate managing Spark. I hate jars. It'd be great, to see more Rust-based SDKs come out that I don't have to use 20 other tools just to write an iceberg table. Let me do it. And I guess the milquetoast answer is more security features, right? The iceberg rest catalog getting extended to build in more authentication, authorization, use SSO, things like that.
Right, quickly, maybe we I don't think really on the clock, like very quickly, like Dipti, Arturas, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's a miracle that we've come down to 3 formats across the industry. Now let's get to another miracle and maybe come up with a catalog or something that's more standardized across. Otherwise, it becomes hard for everyone. And so make it part of your next Christmas or holiday wish. I think AI use cases on top of open lakes and open data are going to be phenomenal. So that's what I'm looking to personally.
And I personally, just too quick, I love S3 as a storage, but come on, it's already 20 years in the business. So maybe we can come up with something better. I mean, that's what I would look for.
Oh, that's a big topic. We should chat. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. This was awesome. It was such a great chat. We could go on and on, but thank you for being here.